What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you an update for Greedfall 2, The Dying World, a game I haven't taken a look at in a little while. I believe the last time I talked about it was in April, when it got another large update. But this time around, they just released their 0.3 patch as part of their early access journey, and after taking some time to take a look at it, I think it's actually pretty promising. In many ways, I think it finally pushes the game towards feeling a bit more complete in a lot of respects because, as you may remember or may not, I guess, Greedfall 2, I would say probably released into early access a little too early. It was extremely rough around the edges, not to mention the shift in combat that in and of itself would have been cause for concern from the people who just enjoyed the original like I did, but it didn't help that the version of that combat they got was extremely rough and bare bones. Add on top of that some tumultuous times after the game released into early access for the studio, Spiders. That is to say, the development studio is named Spiders, not literal spiders. I can see how that would be confusing for people. I believe they even had to fully replace one of the voice actors after a bunch of stuff had already been recorded, as an example, and so it took them a while to hit their stride here, but it looks like they're finally getting things moving and putting out updates at a regular pace, things like that. And so that brings us to today's update, but if you want to look at what's been here previously, my other videos for the game should still exist, so you can just search that on the channel and find them, because otherwise what we're here to talk about for this particular update is the brand new area, Perrin, a city controlled by the merchants, as well as some familiar family names, a new companion from the Coin Guard, Till, an updated character creator that actually lets you create a character, photo mode, game profiles, crafting, armor overhauls, and a few other things. Now, before we dive fully into that, I should mention that if you have the early access for yourself, they did also put in some save files for people to load up and check out the new content, as opposed to having to play through the rest of the game to get to the new point, which is a sizable chunk of content at this point, probably a good 20-25 hours, I'd say, if you really wanted to dig into all of it. But you can just skip to the new area via those save files, which are accessed via the game's installed files. Then you just move them into the save file folder and you're good to go. And I mention that because that is how I'm bringing you some of this footage. Now, with that out of the way, let's actually start talking about this stuff, starting with the new area, Perrin. Perrin is controlled by the Congregation of Merchants. It is a big, proper city, if you will, and it's home to, most notably, a few families that will be familiar if you've played the original game, the De Vesps and the D'Orsays. And you're going to dive into the heart of that rivalry between those two families as the sort of main story hook. But I'll leave that, of course, for another time, as we don't want to get into spoilers. Another aspect of the city is that you see the effects of the Malachor Plague, which plays a big role in both games, as it is what sets the mainland looking for the Isle of Tir Freddy, which you, this time, are a sort of refugee from. But either way, big new zone to explore, all sorts of new side quests and main quests to get up to there. And along the way, you'll even be able to pick up the final new companion, Till. Till is a mercenary from what is known as the Coin Guard, which is just a big guild of mercenaries. But what makes Till interesting is twofold. For starters, despite being a mercenary, he's described as having a very sharp intelligence, combined with his status as a veteran of the battlefield makes him especially dangerous. But beyond just that, he is noteworthy because not only is he our new companion, but he's also the person who kidnapped you and essentially forced you into slavery, which is your reasoning, as part of the main story, for leaving the Isle of Tir Freddy. Seems he's had a bit of a change of heart, and I imagine sort of core of that relationship will play out over the course of the game, but definitely a curious one. So otherwise, he is a big two-handed tank character, focuses on drawing enemy attention and dealing damage in melee, of course. While he is our final character to join the roster here, with the other 6 having already been in play, you can finally customize your own character, which might feel a little new via the updated character creator. So previously what you had access to were basically a few different presets that were very basic, whereas here we see a more fleshed out version of the character creator that's going to let you pick from some basic options or get much more granular and pick general shapes that you can then customize a bunch via sliders, and you can get a lot of different looks that way. I will say there are 2 things probably worth mentioning beyond just, your own cosmetic preferences, I guess, which is that there is a male and female preset that seem to serve as the canonical characters, if you will, and they don't let you customize those for whatever reason. meaning you have to click to a different preset to start customizing. Just thought that was a little strange given how, you could theoretically recreate that via the options anyway, but whatever. The other thing I wanted to mention is that it's going to be a pretty big miss for me that they simply don't let you have a beard here. Very disappointing. Now, alongside your freshly created character, you may well just find yourself wanting to take a picture, and that's where the additional photo mode comes in. They've added that to the game. Pretty basic as far as photo modes go, to be honest with you. Just a few different things that allow you to utilize a free cam to, of course, take a picture, but I didn't see anything in there for like poses or stuff like that, so maybe that stuff will get added later, I suppose, but that's what's there for now. Next up, we've got gaming profiles. Gaming profiles are effectively a take on difficulty options, or perhaps an expansion of difficulty options, you could call it. Basically, you've got 3 to start with, tactical, hybrid, or focused. This is going to decide how much of the party you need to control. Tactical is the game's sort of intended experience where you control all your party. You have to have like tactics and stuff. If you've ever played Dragon Age Origins, it's a lot like that. Hybrid is going to be a bit of a middle ground, allowing you to turn off or on the autonomous AI that's going to run your companions if you don't want to, as well as give you access to just the basic options for controlling some things. Whereas focused basically means you only have to focus on your character. The other characters will do their own thing, you don't need to get involved, and all you really need to do is queue up your own abilities. And while that is simple enough, after that you get a few other options. The actual difficulty of the game, if you want to set it that way, or you can go the custom route, adjusting things like friendly fire, party damage, and enemy damage to either ridiculous numbers or literally nothing. You can also choose to just turn on invincibility if you like. So in that way, I think there will be plenty of challenge or lack of said challenge for the people who are looking for that experience here. Beyond just that stuff, they did add some extra options to rebind keys, mess with the camera controls, things like that, but those are relatively small. Second to last, we then have the updated crafting. This is actually something I enjoyed a lot. It actually reminds me a lot of the way Dragon Age Inquisition handled it, but basically, if you have a character that is skilled in craftsmanship, you can use the services of like a blacksmith or just a workbench in general to then take a bunch of crafting material to either make your own stuff or upgrade what you've already got. The upgrades in particular are what are interesting to me because items will have potential slots for upgrades like shoulders, belts, things like that, and you can, of course, then add on to those pieces, of course, affecting the item stats and how it looks, actually, which is, again, very similar to what Dragon Age Inquisition did with crafting, which is something I liked. Neat to see a system like that at play here. But perhaps one of the bigger changes of this patch is actually what they did to the armor system. They changed it pretty significantly. So previously, it had a very sort of Divinity Original Sin 2 system where you had physical and magic armor that had to be chewed through before you could attack something's health. That has since been adjusted, and now you still have physical and magical armor, however, it functions a bit differently. Physical armor will, of course, reduce incoming physical damage, but depending on how much of it you have, you can basically acquire like shields of armor or like little pips of armor above your health bar that then kind of give you an idea of how much damage you're actually reducing. The catch being that some items as well as certain abilities, things like that, can either bypass or destroy those pips of armor, thus reducing the armor and increasing the amount of physical damage you're taking, allowing it to be a more tactical option. The new magic armor system is, I would say, kind of interesting in the sense that it provides a sort of mana shield, if you will, to your health bar in a way that kind of reminds me of something like Path of Exile, actually. But effectively, it gives you extra health by giving you a damage shield over your HP, and then while that is active, you'll actually take reduced incoming damage from magic as well. And so those two systems combined both, of course, still do their primary job of damage mitigation, while at the same time being a little more interesting than having to just carve your way through a second health bar basically before you get to something's actual health. That said, however, I still think combat is probably going to be the most contentious thing about this game's ultimate release. Most everything seems to be moving in the right direction in comparison to the first game, just from this update and everything, but because of the big switch from the first game's more action-oriented combat into the more tactical focused here, that's obviously going to split some opinions for people, and I still think it's an area where they have a fair bit of work to do in terms of making it feel more tactical as well, which they're, definitely getting to, but until the full game releases, we simply have to wait and see how it actually feels in its final iteration. But otherwise, that's pretty much going to do it for this particular update. So hopefully you enjoyed all of that. On my end, like I mentioned, I think this game is finally starting to come together a little bit, and after the very slow going that it kicked off its early access period with is certainly nice to see. The devs have committed to a 2026 release. No specific release date or window or anything, and given the increased pace of updates, that's not too surprising either. And so while I don't know if I'm going to cover every update this game drops, what I am going to do is obviously review the game when it releases, so one way or another there will be more of this game on the channel to come, so if you're looking forward to that, by all means, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.